was what I was going to talk about just yesterday afternoon, so right up to date. As many of you will know, I did my evaluation training here in the States, and I've been back home in Aotearoa, New Zealand for the last 10 years. And I guess some of the way that I think about this now is sort of a lot of what I've learned since I have gone back home. And one of the things that we kind of traditionally do, and it's now one of the things I do to kick off my workshops, is to sort of talk a little bit about my own roots, who I am and where I come from, because that helps people understand where I'm coming from as an evaluator. So in New Zealand, we tend to just go back to our ancestry for starters. So I'm kind of going, David asked about childhood, but I kind of went back a little bit further than that. So I'm a sixth generation Kiwi. My ancestors were some Scottish railway workers and some English farmers and agricultural labourers, and they immigrated to New Zealand a long time ago. My dad was an electrician for the Merchant Navy. My mum was a nurse who was trained in a practitioner kind of hospital-based space. So I was the first generation of my family to go to university. So, and I kind of explained this in terms of like, what does that mean for me as an evaluator? That means that I guess none of my family know any of these big words. So I guess, and I've always had this little bit of fish out of water thing with like just not quite, you know, I remember like arriving in graduate school and all these people with all these big words and like trying to read these articles. I was like, oh my God, can I even do this? So, you know, but I think every graduate student gets a little bit of imposter syndrome, you know, when they get there and they're like, oh my God, they accepted me by accident. Soon they're going to find out that it was a mistake. So yeah, and then David asked me some questions about influences of my parents on my thinking, and that got me thinking. So my dad, as I said, was an electrician. He dropped out of school at 15, became an electrician, joined the Merchant Navy, and then after that, when he came ashore, he got into sort of sales and then management and then public affairs. And what I remember from my childhood about him is he's a very kind of logical and rational thinker. So like he's just very good at kind of framing an argument and discussing the issues and digging under them. And so, you know, we used to go at that quite a lot. I remember him teaching me chess. You know, I mean, there's a lot of kind of, I don't know, using the mind in a logical way. My mum, in contrast, was the exact opposite. So I'm not entirely sure how they cope with each other over the years that they have. She's what I would call a completely illogical thinker. Like, and she frankly admits this. I would make a horrendous evaluator. Like, we'll be in the middle of a debate about something and like identifying, you know, so my dad and I would be at like, what are the underlying assumptions here, and let's dig into that, and like, well, what basis are you saying this, if we do this? And she'll just come in with some completely irrelevant piece of evidence, like an anecdote that's got nothing to do with the base of the argument. And we're like, what? So what did I learn from them? One was, I guess, that rational thinking and reasoning stuff, and then also how to deal with completely illogical people and help corral them back to the point. So these are all good skills as an evaluator. I was the eldest kid in my family, and my youngest sister was just 15 months younger. So what happens as any eldest child would know in that situation is you get to spend a bit more time with your dad while your mum's dealing with the baby. So I probably spent a little bit more time with him, which is maybe why my thinking resembles his a little bit more. When I got into, I had what some people might call an unstable educational history, which means I got into just so many different subjects. I mean, when I got to university, I had no clue what I wanted to do really. I just followed what was interesting, and that turned out to be everything from astrophysics, philosophy, horticulture, business research, marketing, French, psychology, whatever. And anyway, my first degree was in chemistry, and then I got into psychology, and I quite liked the systematic inquiry piece of psychology, but something always bugged me about it seemed to be getting very kind of narrow and trivial, and kind of that word shallow that was brought up before. Something bothered me about it, but somehow I don't know, it wasn't the norm in that every discipline has its own culture and the way that you make sense and the way that you talk about things, and it wasn't sort of, I don't know, it seemed maybe not apt to question it, or I didn't have the words. Then I remember like turning up at Claremont and, you know, really excited that it was an applied program and having a lot of fun with that. And I remember sitting in Michael Scriven's classes for the first time and sort of thinking, what I really resonated with him was like this. I mean, okay, he's a kind of heavy-duty theoretical thinker, so I'm like struggling with the words and everything, and I remember I'm saying, like, I don't know what you're talking about, because I'm a bit verbally challenged, and he says, surely not dictionary challenged, so I had to run off and get my dictionary and try and figure out what was going on. But one thing I really liked about what he was doing was really bringing us back to the kind of common sense piece, like, you know, get a grip, guys, you don't need to sort of think of it that way, like, and it's, somehow he had the words to explain what I was instinctively feeling about this sort of narrow focus that the sciences, the social sciences were going for, so I liked that kind of broader, more practical sense. Let me just jump back to, I remember like, I sort of talked about feeling a little bit like a fish out of water in terms of where I've been. So I went to high school, I was sent to a private high school, so my parents wanted me to have a kind of bit better start than what they had. And so I was kind of one of those kids who felt like they didn't quite belong there. Everyone else's parents were like doctors and lawyers and God, and I'm like, yeah, okay, well. So I sort of became the class joker to compensate. And then, you know, got to university and graduate school, and it was all big words and all the rest of it. So, but one thing I've found, like, over time, and is a kind of gradual realization that actually there's an audience. There are other people frustrated with that, the big words and the narrow focus as well, and there's actually an audience for the kind of more practical, broad brush stuff. So that's brought me back to kind of where I suppose my instincts and the pieces that I brought from my childhood and my parents and that kind of practical piece. So I love listening to the deep thinking theorists and the people who just like go at this completely different, including many in this room. I mean, I love listening to that stuff, but I also feel like I found my voice to kind of do the stuff that I love doing and play from my strengths and work with more of the practice-based theory rather than the theory-based practice. So I love doing a bit of a mix of that. But what a great place to be, and like the biggest evaluation geek fest in the world, and like listening to stories of where people